Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Grit, Guts, and Courage Show. This is Kelly Falardeau, and this is the show where we chat with people who have had to overcome something, and it took grit, guts, and courage to get through it. And today, my guest is Masha, and I'm just so excited because I met her. Actually, I've met her a few times, but this time I got to hear her story when she was pitching uh, podcasters. So, Masha, I'm really excited to chat with you today and learn what you want to talk about.
Kelly, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit with my story, and hopefully it supports somebody in hearing it and knowing that they can do it also.
You bet. Great. Okay, Masha, we're going to jump right into it. So what is that story of grit, guts, and courage?
Oh my gosh. Well, we all have so many. I think the most massive one was I was doing my business. I was a portrait photographer, doing branding, doing marketing, loving what I'm doing, using that as actually a cover because I love neurology, psychology, physiology. So I was doing all of these things on the back end. You know, it looked like photography on the front. Had the most successful year of my life in 2019. And then August hit and my body shut down. I ended up in the emergency room and my whole life has changed because my body just gave out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And honestly, we're still trying to figure out what happened, but I have a couple of things that I know at least pushed it to the limit. I was living this idea of success, this idea that people, you know, paint this story of this person who is in business and who is doing all these incredible things. Well, all of that was at the expense of me. It was the expense of my life, of my body, of my health, of everything else. And because I was so much tied to this idea of success and bringing, you know, the meaning to it of busyness, that everything I did ignored all of the warning signs and everything else that came with it. And so health crash half a year before the pandemic, unable to use my body, unable to hold my phone in my hand, forget about a camera. I had to hit complete reset and figure everything out from scratch.
Oh my gosh. So how did you do that? What did you have to do?
Well, that's the interesting thing is I think, first of all, when you're in that space, the first thing that you realize is that, holy cow, you've missed a lot of different things. You start becoming so much more aware of yourself, and you start becoming aware of both the things that you're doing well and the things that you're not. So I've noticed that I was doing a lot of things that weren't getting me anywhere, and I could choose to either stay in that space, and that choice was very conscious every single day. And after a while, it just gets old. Like, you get up and you wake up and you're, you know, sad and you're angry and you're upset at the world and at God and at yourself and everything else. And once you make something different, you realize that what's on the other side is actually first and foremost is grace towards yourself and everything else, and to your own journey. But then also what you discover is, what I discovered is that the possibilities are infinite, and the only thing that I had left on my plate that I could access was what I considered to be impossible. And so I went for it because I had nothing better to do.
You know, I understand that because I think a lot of time too, we get so busy doing things, and sometimes we don't think what we do is good enough.
Yeah.
Right? And so then we don't see the success in it, or we don't see how great it is or how good it is that what we've done. And, you know, I know when I talk to people about some of the stuff I've done and, you know, having a documentary about my life story, or, you know, now I'm a 10-time best-selling author, and people think, oh my God, Kelly, that's so amazing. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Right? It's just what I do, right?
Yeah.
So I don't always see the impact or the power of what I'm doing. And so I feel like that might have been the same situation with you.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And in that space, because we're unaware of our own amazing selves, we become compliant, and we become like, we stagnate, and we become like this, you know, I think most of us, I'm starting to really truly believe this. I think most of us have something that we see that is so much bigger than where we are. And
Yeah.
if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I don't think I have anything, at some point you probably did, and you kind of, we force ourselves to stop believing it. I've always had the sense that I wanted to change the world, and I had no idea what that looks like. I kept having these, as long as I remember, I've always been problem solving and trying to do this and that, and always, you know, for the first part of my life, people would kick the chair from under me, and then I learned to do it myself. They didn't need them to do that anymore. I got it. And so when we're in that space, is first of all recognizing that we have this bigger sense as long as we allow it to be there. And the second thing is it's accessible to you. You don't have to go through this giant trauma in your life to be able to access it. Now, those of us who have gone through traumas, we realize that it's much easier when that happens because you don't really have a lot of options left.
Yeah.
Like it's like the do or die kind of scenario. It's either you just give up on life, and God knows I've tried, and it's like, nope, this mission is bigger than this. Okay, I'm in.
So what is the gift in it?
Yeah.
What's the gift in that trauma that happened to you?
I think the biggest gift, first of all, it's learning that I'm a lot tougher than I could ever imagine myself to be.
Mm.
Like, it makes me feel like I could truly do anything. And I took this gift and I ran with it. I'm like, okay, let's push it to the max. Let's start listening to the past Ken Kragen, and his whole ideology of the impossible is actually easier than the possible because less people are doing it. And so I'm like, okay, let's, if I have nothing to lose, let's start pushing that boundary and see how far it goes. And I have at this point, like, I have said with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and held his hand. I have, said in the home of royalty. I've been working now with governments, and you have to understand, I don't have a degree. I don't have a formal. I went to school. I have I love to learn. I don't have a degree though, and I have, I'm oh gosh, this was a hang up of mine before. I'm a little girl photographer. There's a word in Russian that's like a little girl. That's it's very diminutive, and that's all I saw myself to be. And as soon as that was released, it's like, what if I could change the world? Let's give it a try. And everything just keeps opening up. Like, as soon as you're in that open space, things continue to open up. You stop looking at the locked door in front of you and then you turn around and you see the hallway full of doors that are open.
Okay, so I heard about you, holding the Dalai Lama's hand. How did that happen? I need to know.
Oh my gosh, that was a level of miracles coming together back to back. And what's interesting is I think I had this expectation going into this as all of these doors were opening. It's a point where I stopped believing in coincidences, and I started believing in synchronicity and truth and following your path, because all of these things that happened could not have been orchestrated by anything other than, whatever you believe in, God, universe, energy, higher self, whatever you want to call it, right? Because I couldn't orchestrate that as a person. All I did was I stepped on that path. I had this expectation of it looking perfect because, again, I'm like, okay, I'm experimenting in this space. And it still had a lot of challenges, especially on the back end of it. A lot of things have come up. And I think it's teaching me this idea of the polarity of life, right? What we consider to be good happens, what we consider to be bad happens, and we get to experience both and then choose where we sit on that scale as a general experience of things. So what happened was actually Corey's event last November. I did something crazy. I think that's when I got the nickname Masha Pavlova.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'd love to go into the story, but there are other ones I don't want to focus on. But essentially, I had something click in me that told me to tell Ken Honda, who was one of the main keynote speakers, to ask him if I can come stay at his house in Japan. And like, that was so out of character for me. In fact, like I kind of saw that happening in slow motion, and it felt like that part of me that would normally be the reason and logic and says this is probably not something you should do, was just passed out on the side. And I'm observing else and going, okay, I guess this is happening. And that weekend became really interesting because so that was Friday. I remember the outline of this. It was crazy. I got off the call. I had a mini panic attack because I'm like, I don't know what I just did. I don't know what just happened. And the next day I got message from my client. This client bought one of my highest packages. She was paying me monthly, 16-month plan. And I got a message from her, Masha, we need to talk. And I'm going, oh no, oh no. And the story that our mind spins about, it's got to be this or this or that. And it's always negative. And I'm like, okay, no. Like, I'm in the space of opportunities. Let's see what this is really about. And she goes, Masha, we get on the call. She's like, Masha, I'm very intuitive. I think you're going to need some money coming up. I'm not sure what it's for, but would you be okay if I paid you a couple months in advance? Uh, sure. Why not? Like, okay. um, all right. And so that was Saturday before Corey announced the programs that he was talking about. And I'm like, I need to be there. Holy cow, I need to be there. That same day, there was a woman who was on the call who was asking for help for her mentor. Her mentor was doing a documentary in India, and she was asking for help with marketing. And I know a few people who are who can help with that. And I'm like, oh, let me link them together. And as we get in a call, I said, it's always been my dream to meet His Holiness. I've had visions of this for the last 10 years, keep meeting people who work directly with him, interestingly enough. And internally, I know it's going to happen. I just don't know how. And so we're having this conversation. I said, wouldn't it be funny, wouldn't it be cool, if she's looking for a photographer, let me know. If she's looking to have another person join her, let me know. And 1 week later, I get in a call with this woman, and she had herself and 3 other women that are going with her. One of the women dropped out that morning. We talked in the evening, and she said, there's an opening.
Oh my gosh.
And then she said the price. And I'm like, there's no way in living heck that I can make this happen, says my logical brain, and my heart says, you're going to be there.
Wow.
And from that point, it was grace of again, God, universe, of people. I reached out to individuals. I had grace from her. I had grace from others, and we made it work. That trip was happening in 2 weeks. So I applied for the visa. It was a 3-week trip. I had to apply. An incredible woman here locally who takes care of my dog. She sponsored a big part of it, and she sponsored the whole stay of my dog, because 3 weeks is a lot. And the next thing I know, I'm in all these incredible places and doing these just phenomenal things that have truly broken through any ceiling I could imagine myself having, or anybody else. And now my goal is to do the same thing for others.
So then you got to actually meet him and hold his
Yes.
hand.
Oh my gosh. So that's the other interesting thing. I noticed that, at least in my experience of this journey, you don't really know until you know. You might know it, like you have this internal feeling of, yes, this is going to happen. And yet the whole time we were questioning. So we got there, and they couldn't tell us if we're actually meeting him or not. They said, if he's not feeling well, if he's doesn't feel like it, if something else happens, he's just not gonna, like, or he might come out, wave, and leave, right? And in my mind, my experience of His Holiness has been always watching him with like hundreds, if not thousands, of people surrounding everywhere, right? And here we are in this tiny little group, and we're supposed to have a private audience, and they're telling us, like, even the morning of, we're like, we didn't know if we're actually going to meet him. I think it was the longest couple of hours of my life. The process was amazing too. Like oh gosh, it was this whole process of actually being able to get into the space in the first place. And then we were just waiting, and I remember the doors were closed, they opened them up, they rolled out this chair, and we're just sitting there. It's just like this open door and this chair that's just sitting there. And yeah, he came out, and we got to come up to him with our small group, and I bowed in his lap, and I held his hand, and then we sat with him for a few minutes, and it was the most. His hands are so soft. Like, that was one of them. I'm like, like his hands are incredibly soft, and it was just the most incredible experience, because it felt like after that it just opened everything. It opened everything, and it hasn't been. I don't want to claim that it was easy, or if that things didn't go off, but everything keeps coming back to alignment as long as I'm not blocking it, and it's been phenomenal since.
Did you get to get a picture with him?
Yes, we have a photo with His Holiness. I'm right there. You can't see our hands, but you can see, I'm right next to him there, and it's just a small little group. It was, oh my gosh, it was truly an experience of a lifetime.
I think, like, I got to meet Wayne Dyer, my mentor, and yeah, it was truly incredible, because I never thought I would ever get to meet him. And I remember saying to myself, I want to meet my 2 favorite authors, and one is Wayne Dyer and Doreen Virtue. And sure enough, Hay House was putting on a conference in Maui, and guess who the two speakers were? Wayne
Oh my
Dyer
God.
and Doreen Virtue. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I kept seeing this conference, and then it didn't clue into me. Well, eventually it clued into me. Hey, you asked for this, right?
Yes.
And so I said, okay, you're right. I did. I did ask for this. Now show me the money, because I was a single mom just going through my divorce and everything. And I was like, well, I don't have the money to go. So show me the money. And sure enough, within a couple days, I had got a check for $1,500 that I thought I was only getting like 100. And they raised my credit card limit. And I was like, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to go. And then I kept thinking, well, I have to ask my ex-husband. And I'm like, why do I have to ask my ex-husband? We're not even married anymore. And I'm like, I don't need his permission to go. I've got the time to go. I'm gonna go. And so sure enough, I booked my flight, paid for the hotel, and I went. And so, the beautiful thing with Wayne Dyer is kind of like you, he spent time with us. And, anybody that got to talk to him, like, he took time with everybody, which was so beautiful. And I got to get a picture with him, and I gave him one of my blankets that say you are loved, you're needed, you're wanted. And then he passed away 4 months later. And so I'm just, I really like to encourage people, if there's something that you want to do, you've got to do it, because you never know when or if or what could happen later. So that's why I really love your story about meeting him and holding his hand, because there's very, very few people that can say they did that. So
Yeah.
so my question to you is, you've got a young girl sitting in front of you, and she has this dream to meet the Dalai Lama in person. What would you say to her?
Hmm. That's a great question. I would tell her that, first of all, do it. First and foremost, if nothing else, do it. I would tell her that she's here and she's asking the right questions, and that question itself is going to bring that closer to her. Now she has to find that alignment in herself and take the next step. I would also tell her to take that idea, whether it's His Holiness the Dalai Lama or anybody else, and in that experience, first of all, know that it's possible, and you can do it. You can be there, and use that opportunity to recognize that these people we look up to, these incredible individuals, there's so much different between them and us, and yet there's really not. I think that's the biggest thing I would share with her, which was the breakthrough for me, is that in meeting him, it was the most incredible thing, because usually we look up to him as this, as this holy figure, and yet his hand was shaking.
Hmm.
And there was something about, like, one of the things I learned was that trip was actually expedited because they weren't sure, how his health is going to be. And so this idea of this incredibly holy man who's a holy icon to his people, experiencing him that way, as well as his humanity, it kind of broke through this ideology that anybody who we look up to is somehow different, which then allows me to believe that we can be capable of anything, because there's not that much separates us from them. There's not an us and them. There's a what are you called to be? And if meeting your heroes allows you to step more into that, that's the invitation there. That's the gift.
Right. I think what it also teaches you is to trust, right? Because trust that you're going to meet them, or trust that the universe is going to bring that to you, and trust in yourself that you have those abilities. So that's the biggest message I get, is it's all about trust.
Absolutely.
Sure, that when one of the things I noticed too is when things like that happen, it helps me to trust even more,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And I think I love your questions. I love where your mind is with this, because I think then it's a three-pronged system. So it's do it, trust it, and then ask. The thing that closes that loop is, because if you take your trust and you sit with it
Yeah.
and you're stationary, that's it. You're not moving anywhere. If you just do it and you're not trusting, then you're putting it on yourself to make it happen. And then, and it's maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it's really all on you, versus the trust expands that past your own capabilities. And then asking allows you to open yourself up to having the participation of others, because we're not alone in this. And had I not asked, there's no way in any chance that anything from this last 6 months could have possibly happened.
Wow. Love it. Okay, so Masha, how can people work with you? What do you do?
Great question. So, Kelly, this is a working title. So my working title is I am an overseer of infinite projects. I have found that instead of burying myself into a space that I do everything in, I have found my superpower and I'm applying it to different areas. The way that I would love to support others is that I am working on some big global projects specifically around agriculture, housing, education, as well as business sustainability. And my role and what I build is I build systems and structures for people to combine their efforts and their energies with others, with tools, with investors, in being able to have sustainable solutions that actually solve the world problems that we've been trying to face for years, instead of putting it off for the next generation. I truly believe with everybody who we have and everything we have accessible to us, we can make the change today. There's nothing that's stopping us from doing so. And so if you are listening to this and if you have a big mission and if you want to be connected to somebody who is doing more of that kind of work, again, not doing this alone, because this is how we make the change happen, I would love to connect with you and see how we can support your projects.
Love it. Okay, so how can people get in touch with you?
So you can go to connectwithmasha.com and you'll find my website. You'll have my calendar there. You'll have some of the projects I'm currently working on, as well as the businesses I'm involved in. And if you feel called to do so, grab a spot, and I would love to connect and see how I can help.
Excellent. Okay, Masha, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yes. If you're here listening to this today, that is not a coincidence. There's no such thing. And so find out what that message is for you. And I know you can feel it. It's tingling. It's probably somewhere in your heart, in your chest. It's probably warm. It's radiating through your body. So as you're hearing that message, I invite you to put it out there and take the steps towards it, because I think there's a gift for you on the other side.
I love it. There you go. Okay, there you go, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Masha, for being my guest today. I just love chatting with you. And yeah, stay tuned for the next episode of the Grit, Guts, and Courage Show.